This is the Photos with Disturbing Backgrounds Iceberg. I made this myself, and I warn you that most of you don't have the stomach to stick around until the end, because some of these photos will make your skin crawl. Let's start with the tip of the iceberg. Level 1. Robert Overacre. Niagara Falls is a group of 3 waterfalls that span the Ontario province in Canada and New York in the United States. It attracts tourists and jumpers alike, aka the Niagara Daredevil, who dreamed of joining the privileged ranks of those who have gone over the falls and survived. The first ever person to accomplish this feat was 63-year-old Michigan schoolteacher Annie Taylor in 1901. When she was helped to shore, Taylor warned anyone who would listen not to attempt this stunt. But her pleas fell on deaf ears. Over the next century, 14 more people would try and make it over. One of them was 39-year-old stuntman Robert Overacre. On October 1st, 1995, Overacre was going to take on the Horseshoe Falls, the largest of the 3 at 187 feet high, to raise awareness about homelessness. The plan was to ride the jet ski to the brink of the falls, and then Robert would let go of the jet ski just as he deployed a rocket-propelled parachute. It would take him safely to the river below the falls where he would be rescued. At 12:30 p.m., Overacre took off on the jet ski. Everything went according to plan at first, and he made it to the edge of the waterfall. Then his plans fell flat. The parachute didn't deploy. Overacre's stepbrother, friends, and onlookers could only watch in horror as Overacre disappeared into the mist. Not long after the jump, Overacre's body was found by a tour boat. Crew members tried to resuscitate him, but it was already too late. The impact would have been similar to smashing into concrete. Some said it was an epic way to go out, but I bet his wife Lori probably disagreed with that. McQuilkin Brothers lightning strike. In the summer of 1975, the McQuilkin family was on a vacation in California. On August 20th, the 3 siblings decided to hike in Sequoia National Park. The sky was dark and there was a light rain by the time they reached Morro Rock, a popular tourist attraction. Shortly after they reached the top, they noticed their hair was standing on end. Laughing at this bizarre sight, the siblings whipped out their old Kodak camera and started taking pictures of each other. After 18-year-old Michael had just got a picture with his 12-year-old brother Sean, he stuck his right hand in the air. Immediately, everyone heard a loud buzz coming from the ring he had on, but they thought nothing of it and were still laughing. They finally left when it started to hail, but halfway down the rock, there was a loud explosion as Michael and Sean were electrocuted. Michael was fine, but Sean would suffer third-degree burns to his back and elbows. At the time Sean and Michael had been struck by lightning, 3 other hikers had also been hit. One of them, a man taking photos at the top, would be unconscious for 6 months, and all the hair on his body was burnt off. He was lucky. Another hiker, Lawrence Brady, was killed almost instantly. The McQuilkin family later sent the pictures to the local rangers, who have since used them in handouts and slides, advising hikers about the dangers of lightning strikes. Princess Diana's final moments. One of the most popular and beloved celebrities in the 1990s was the former Princess of Wales, Diana Spencer. Her rise to fame started when the 19-year-old Lady Diana was engaged to 32-year-old Prince Charles. Even after her marriage fell apart, Diana remained in the public eye. Every step she took was shadowed by paparazzi desperate to get pictures of her. One such image would be her last. But on August 30th, 1997, Diana had no idea what would happen that day. She was at the Ritz Hotel in Paris, attempting to go out for dinner with her boyfriend, Dodi Al-Fayed. The paparazzi swarmed them, and they had to return to the hotel. By midnight, they left the Ritz, planning to use a decoy car to fool the press that was now camped outside. Henri Paul, the deputy head of the Ritz security, was in the driver's seat, Diana and Dodi in the back. But as the Mercedes S280 set out, the paparazzi followed in cars and motorcycles, desperate to get pictures of the couple. Henri put his foot down and sped off into the night at dangerously high speeds, into the Pont-de-Olma tunnel. It never made it out of the other end. Henri had lost control of the car and slammed into a huge concrete pillar. Before the police showed up, paparazzi swarmed the accident, some taking pictures, some trying to help. Very few of these pictures made it out, as the police confiscated most of it. Dodi and Henri died at the scene, but Diana died some hours later. The sole survivor was Trevor Rees-Jones, Dodi's bodyguard. Every bone in his face was shattered and he could not remember anything about the crash. There were many conspiracies around the accident, from claims that only Trevor had his seatbelt on to the MI6 and the Duke of Edinburgh planning the accident. In 2008, an investigation claimed that the driver, Henri Paul, was drunk and had drugs in his system. Both he and the paparazzi were blamed for causing the accident. A tragic end to the Princess of Wales. Jolie Callan case. 18-year-old Jolie Callan had a problem, and it was her boyfriend, 20-year-old Lauren Bunner. He was possessive and jealous and didn't allow her to spend time with anyone else. Each time Jolie tried to break things off with Lauren, he threatened to commit suicide. Jolie finally ended things with him. Months later, Lauren asked her to go hiking with him as friends, he said. Jolie texted a friend to tell them she would be hiking with Lauren at Cheaha State Park in the Alabama countryside, jokingly adding, "If something happens to me, you'll know who I was with." Fateful last words. On October 30th, 2015, Lauren uploaded 3 photos of Jolie to Instagram. They were all taken during their hike with her dog Kiba. The very last picture showed Jolie enjoying the breathtaking view. Not long after putting up the photo, Lauren called 911 and said that he had murdered Jolie, shooting her twice in the head and pushing her body off the cliff. But there was a twist. According to Lauren, he and Jolie had a murder pact, but he had backed out after doing his part. When that didn't get him off the hook, he claimed he had Asperger's syndrome. He also tried to get sentenced as a minor. None of it worked. Lauren was sentenced to 52 years in prison. Some say he snapped because Jolie rejected him. Others believed he had lured Jolie out there to end her life. Level 2. Tupac Shakur. These days, the worst thing that can happen to a rapper is to get dissed in a song that goes viral. But back in the 90s, rapping was life and death, and many of them died violently. One of them was Tupac Shakur. Tupac Shakur, popularly known by the stage name Tupac, is still the greatest and most influential rapper ever. He released 4 albums that would top the charts. But things weren't going so great during the latter part of Tupac's career. He had survived being shot 5 times, faced legal troubles, and was in the middle of a rivalry between the West Coast and East Coast rappers. But things turned violent on September 7th, 1996. Tupac had attended a boxing match at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas, along with the head of his record label, Suge Knight. The two men climbed into a black BMW and drove into the night. This was the last picture of Tupac alive. Minutes later, they stopped at a traffic light when a Cadillac pulled up right next to them and opened fire. 25-year-old Tupac was hit 4 times. He died a week later. There were several suspects: his friend turned rival, East Coast rapper Notorious B.I.G. But 6 months later, Biggie was also killed in a drive-by. Then there was a gang member called Orlando Anderson. The two had been in an altercation 3 hours before the shooting. Several witnesses claimed to have seen Orlando in the white Cadillac, but he denied it. 2 years after Tupac's death, Orlando was killed in a gang shootout. The case was cold for decades till 2023, when Dwayne Davis, Orlando's uncle, released the book Compton Street Legend, talking about Tupac's murder. Dwayne had always said he was in the car with the shooter. 2 months later, he was arrested for the murder. Eliza Lamb and the Cecil Hotel. The Cecil Hotel is one of the most notorious buildings in Los Angeles. At least 16 unexplained deaths have occurred in or around the hotel, and when 21-year-old Eliza Lamb set out for LA, she didn't know she would become one of them. Eliza was a student at the University of British Columbia, Vancouver. In January 2013, she took time off her studies to explore the West Coast and lodged in the Cecil for a couple of days, but her parents would report her missing after she didn't call when she was supposed to. The police found all her things in her room except for her phone. They searched the hotel thoroughly, but there was no sign of her. The only clue was a surveillance camera that captured Eliza on January 31st. But the video raised more questions than answers. The video showed Eliza jumping in and out of the elevator, putting in random numbers, and talking to someone off the camera. This was the last image of Eliza. And then she was gone. More than 2 weeks after Eliza's disappearance, the guests noticed the water had an unusual taste. A maintenance worker inspected the water tank above the hotel and found Eliza's naked body inside. Residents of the hotel had been drinking her remains. But the discovery raised more questions. That part of the hotel could only be accessed by locks, passcodes, and keys. Her phone was also never found. The cause of Eliza's death remains a mystery to this day. Wu Yongning's fatal fall. 26-year-old Wu Yongning, popularly called Chinese Superman, was known for his hair-raising stunts on tall buildings and scaffoldings. The rooftop daredevil shot to fame, putting out more than 500 videos of his daring stunts on skyscrapers. He had earned 550,000 yuan, about $83,000, doing sponsorship deals and sharing the videos on social media platforms Weibo and the video website Huoshan. On November 8, 2017, Wu took on his next challenge, a 2-minute video at the top of the tallest building in Changsha City, the Huayuan International Center. After setting up his phone on top of an opposite building, Wu appeared on the other building. The public wasn't allowed to climb the last 20 floors of the building, so many believed he free climbed up the 22 stories from the 40th floor to reach the roof. Wu didn't stop climbing. Dangling off its roof by his fingertips, he started to do chin-ups at the edge. Then he began struggling to get a grip. For 20 seconds, he hung between life and death. Then he let go and fell, the tragic closing act of the daredevil stuntman. Catherine Chappelle's lion attack. If there was one animal you never want to be stuck in a tight space with, it's a lion. But every year, thousands travel to African countries to see this wild beast in its element. In 2015, Catherine Chappelle joined that number. Catherine was a visual effects engineer who had worked on blockbuster movies like Godzilla, Divergent, Captain America: The Winter Soldier, and Game of Thrones, which won her team an Emmy. On June 1, 2015, Catherine was driven around the Lion Park in South Africa, a park that boasted about super close-up views of the lions. They had stopped to view a pride of lions when Catherine rolled down the passenger window to get a close-up shot. She didn't pay attention when a lioness approached the vehicle and stood up on her rear paws at the window. One of the other tourists took pictures expecting to capture a cute moment of the lioness trying to peer into the car. Instead, he watched with horror as the lioness jumped into the car and attacked. Rangers ran up to chase them off, but it was too late. Catherine died within minutes, a tragic reminder of the beauty and danger of nature. Trans-Asia Flight 235 crash. On February 4th, 2015, TransAsia Airways Flight 235 took off from the Taipei Zhongshan Airport in Taiwan with 58 people on board. Less than a minute after takeoff, the pilots reported an engine failure. Onlookers watched in horror as the aircraft flew dangerously between buildings. A dashcam captured the moment it clipped a building and a taxi before it crashed into a shallow river. Rescue workers rushed over to get out any survivors, but 43 of the 58 people on board were dead. One of them was the pilot, 42-year-old Liao Qian-sung. His body was found clutching the joystick in the plane's cockpit. Pilot Liao Qian-sung, a former Air Force pilot, was hailed as a hero for narrowly avoiding buildings and averting a worse disaster. But an investigation revealed that he was the cause of the accident. During takeoff, he had made errors during the start procedure that affected one engine. This wasn't that bad. The plane was designed to fly with one engine if the pilot knew exactly what to do. Liao did not. A year before, he had failed simulator checks. 4 months before the fatal crash, an instructor noted that he needed more training to handle engine failures at takeoff. As Lian tried to restart the first engine, he would switch off the other. When he noticed his mistake, it was too late to do anything. Akbar Salubiro and the Python Attack. When 25-year-old Akbar Salubiro did not return from his plantation on Sulawesi Island, Indonesia, his family was immediately concerned. The next evening, concerned friends and relatives found a giant python sprawled out in Akbar's back garden. The 23-foot snake was having difficulty moving around because of a suspicious-looking object in its belly. When the villagers cut open the belly of the snake, they found Akbar dead inside, still with his boots on. That's when some of them remembered hearing cries from the palm grove the night Akbar was reported missing. He had been ambushed and killed by the snake before it swallowed him whole. Allison Parker and Adam Ward. On August 26, 2015, 40,000 people tuned in to watch the morning segment WDJB, an interview of Vicky Gardner by local news reporter Allison Parker and photojournalist Adam Ward. Instead, they could only watch in horror as, right in the middle of the interview, loud bangs rang out, followed by screams as a terrified Allison ran away. The bangs continued as Adam's camera tumbled to the floor and the camera footage was cut off, but not before it picked up a dark figure in the shadows pointing his gun at Adam, a former colleague, 41-year-old Vester Lee Flanagan II. Vester had been fired from WDJB 2 years earlier for threatening several co-workers. After that, he tried to sue the station, but the case was dismissed. Vester also couldn't get any jobs because of his terrible work history, so he took it out on the network. After the shooting, Vester faxed a 27-page jumble of thoughts to ABC News claiming that the shooting was in retaliation for the Charleston church shooting. He also uploaded a 52-second video of the shooting, filmed GoPro style, on his Facebook. He also released several tweets on Twitter. One of them blamed Allison for making a racist comment and Adam for reporting to HR. 5 hours later, Vester killed himself after a police chase. Vicky survived the incident, but her two companions were not so lucky. Both Allison and Adam died at the scene. Level 3. The Duck Boat of Table Rock Lake, Missouri. The Duck Boat was a wheeled amphibious vehicle designed to work both on land and water. It was built in 1944 and used by the United States military during World War II and the Korean War to transport people and supplies from ships to the shore. After the war, these relics were sold and the Duck Boat tours were born. Today, they're a tourist attraction in cities across Canada, Ireland, the UK, and the United States. But what sounds like a simple ride has had a long history of accidents and fatalities. One notable incident was in 1999 when 13 people died after a duck boat sank on Lake Hamilton in Arkansas. After that tragedy, recommendations were made to reduce the fatalities, such as having passengers wear life jackets. Yet these were ignored and would lead to fatal consequences. At 6 p.m. on July 19, 2019, the National Weather Service warned about a coming thunderstorm at Table Rock Lake in Missouri. But the operator of the duck boat didn't listen. 29 passengers and 2 crew members boarded the duck boat and sailed onto the lake. They had been told they wouldn't need life jackets. 35 minutes later, a woman on a nearby steamboat made a horrifying video of the boat taking in water and struggling with huge waves. A bystander on a steamboat trying to get to the boat captured the last image of the boat before it capsized and sank. They were able to save 14 lives, but 17 others, including 9 from the same family, drowned. The youngest was a year old. The boat's captain, Kenneth Scott McGee, did not go down with the ship. He, along with 2 supervisors, faced 63 felony charges in connection with the 17 deaths. Chernobyl mutated piglet photo. At the Ukrainian National Chernobyl Museum in Kiev, there's a weird-looking piglet on display. It was born with a deformity that gave it 8 eerie legs because of the worst nuclear accident in history: the explosion of a reactor at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in the former Soviet Union. Nearby cities were evacuated, thousands left their homes, and only a handful would ever return. The Soviet Union put the number of deaths at 50, but it's been estimated that the radiation released killed at least 4,000 from cancer. Children in particular were affected, with more than 6,000 children and adolescents developing thyroid cancer. Many animals in Chernobyl were born with mutations. These animals could not reproduce, and in the more severe cases, they died within hours. While several animals without mutations are now appearing around the Chernobyl exclusion zone, humans cannot live there for the next 24,000 years. Keith Sapford's fall from a plane. In the 1970s, airport security wasn't what it was today. There was no TSA, and no one worried about liquids and carry-ons or removing shoes. Just about anyone could walk up to the gate or the tarmac. This was precisely what 14-year-old Keith Sapford hoped for when he stepped into Sydney Airport. Keith had always been a restless kid. His parents enrolled him in a school for troubled teens, but a few weeks later, Keith ran away. On February 22, 1970, he appeared at Sydney Airport. Maybe he heard the story of 17-year-old Cuban Armando Ramirez, who had stowed away on a flight from Havana, Cuba to Madrid, Spain. Whatever the case, Keith made his way to the tarmac and climbed into the wheel well of a plane preparing for takeoff. At the same time, amateur photographer John Gilpin was also at the airport taking pictures. When the Japan-bound plane took off, John was right there taking pictures. He didn't see the wheel compartment reopen to retract its wheels, or the boy who fell out. It would be days before he developed the photos and noticed the tiny figure falling through the air 200 feet to his death. Keith wasn't the last person to stow away in a plane's wheel well. At 14, he wasn't even the youngest. Several people have continued to attempt this daring feat. While a handful of them got hypothermia and survived, the majority of them died from it, fell from the plane, or were crushed to death. Adrian Manovo and Felicity Loveday's ritualistic disappearance. On December 14, 2019, Christina Meneval walked into a police station with a bizarre story to tell. Her brother Adrian and her mother Felicity Loveday had not returned home after a cleansing ritual at sea. Felicity had been the former master of a secret fraternal society called Co-Freemasons. She also believed that salt water was the cure for her bad magic. In 2019, Felicity was suffering from dementia, and her children concluded that the bad magic was back. On December 11th, Adrian took his 83-year-old mother for her cleansing. Christina took pictures for her mother and brother before they set out on a boat. 2 days later, she got a text from Adrian that they were having a good time, and then there was dead silence. Police found their capsized vessel with just one life jacket, but there was no sign of them. Many suspected that Felicity was already dead from how pale she looked in the photo. Christina showed 3 more pictures she'd taken. In one, Felicity was raising an arm. To add to the mystery, before the journey, Adrian had canceled his lease, given his sister a copy of his will, and bought a second boat. The second boat had not been found. The bizarre disappearance has remained a mystery to this day. A mystery almost as big as why you haven't hit that like and subscribe button yet. Pat Tillman's last photo. The story of Patrick leaving a promising $1 million career in the NFL behind for military sweats made him one of the most famous American soldiers. He was deployed to Iraq before moving to Afghanistan. Sometime in April 2014, Pat was photographed enjoying a watermelon. It would be his last picture alive before tragedy hit. On April 22, 2014, the Army reported that Patrick's unit had been attacked in an ambush that left him dead. Another tragedy of the war, or so it seemed. Then, the story fell apart. Patrick had been killed by his fellow Army Rangers in friendly fire. The guy beside him in this picture was one of the shooters. There were allegations that the Army had known all along, but instead of telling his family, they used his death to fuel war propaganda and get others to enlist. Soon there were conspiracy theories that Patrick had been murdered to keep him quiet, since he had become critical of the war. The revelation that his unit had also burned a journal he kept has only kept those stories going. Michael Rockefeller cannibalism photo. Michael Rockefeller was the great-grandson of John D. Rockefeller, the first confirmed American billionaire. But Michael had no interest in his family's vast empire. After graduating from Harvard, he developed an interest in indigenous art and took a position on the board of his father's Museum of Primitive Art. Michael wanted to bring something of his own to the museum. In 1960, his search took him and a bunch of researchers to Dutch New Guinea to meet the Asmat tribe. Michael was able to take pictures of the tribe. By the time he left, he planned to mount the biggest exhibition of Asmat art ever. Michael returned to Asmat in October 1961 with government anthropologist Renee Wassing. They went around villages on a boat trading steel axes, fishing hooks and lines, and tobacco for Asmat art. This was one of the last known photos of him. 1 month later, their boat capsized 12 miles from shore. They waited for help until morning. When it didn't come, Michael decided to swim for shore. It was a fateful decision. The next day, an exhausted Renee was rescued from the water, but Michael was never seen again. The mysterious disappearance of the wealthy heir made the news. Some said he drowned, others said he was still in the jungle, hiding from the responsibilities of his family name. This theory was fueled when a video showing a white man living with the Asmat tribe appeared. But there's another theory that Michael had met a hostile tribe when he got ashore and was eaten. Level 4. Steven Weber's proposal. Steven Weber and his girlfriend, Kenesha Antoine, had traveled together across Africa for over a week. But this time, Steven had something else up his sleeve. He was going to pop the question and wanted it to be unforgettable. So he booked them a stay at a popular underwater cabin at the Manta Resort in Tanzania. The isolated cabin off the coast is divided into 2 parts, a 2-floor wooden deck above water level and an underwater bedroom with a view of the ocean. Steven was going to pop the question there. On September 9, 2019, he put on a mask and fins and dived outside the underwater room to the cabin's glass window. As Kenesha videoed, Steven held a handwritten note in a plastic bag against the glass declaring his love for her. Then he flipped it to the next page, where he asked Kenesha to marry him and pulled out a jewelry box with a ring from his trunk. As he swam up, Kenesha rushed to the deck level to wait for Stephen, but he never came out. Some passing boaters found him alive and one rescuer performed CPR, but Stephen did not survive. He never got to hear Kenesha's reply. The final moments of Jeff Doucette. On February 19, 1984, 11-year-old Jody Ploche was abducted by his karate instructor, Jeff Doucette, a man his family had come to trust, so much so that Jody quit sports to spend more time in Jeff's dojo. Jeff had told Jody's parents he wanted to take the boy on a ride, but it would be 10 days before she heard from him. The police traced the call to a motel in California where Jeff had shaved his beard and dyed Jody's blonde hair black. Jeff told the officers he had been grooming and sexually assaulting Jody for almost a year. Jody's father, Gary, heard the horrifying details from officers working the case. While many parents have said, "If anyone ever touches my kid, I'll kill him," but when Gary said it, he meant it. Jeff was flown back to Louisiana where several people were waiting for him: news crews, police, and a man wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses. That man was Jody's father, Gary, and he had revenge on his mind. As the news crew taped Jeff being marched out of the airport, Gary turned and fired point blank at Jeff's head, killing him instantly. Unlike many shootings, Gary was praised as a hero, and many more believed he shouldn't be charged with murder. In the end, he was sentenced to 5 years probation and 300 hours of community service. Before Gary passed in 2014, he gave one last interview.
Do you regret killing Jeff Doucette?
No.
No. Would you do it again?
Oh, yeah.
Jody has continued his father's work, not by putting bullets in child molesters, but by becoming a sexual abuse awareness activist. Dalan Pua's last photo, missing on Stairway to Heaven. The Stairway to Heaven in Hawaii, also known as the Haiku Stairs, is an old steel structure along a mountain range built by the U.S. Navy during World War II. It had 3,922 steps and led to a secret radio transmitting station. Even though the impressive views from the stairs made it popular with hikers and photographers, it has been officially off-limits since 1987. There were even more reasons to stay away. The stairs were in terrible condition, and with dangerous sheer drops on either side, a fall could be fatal. But many people ignored the warnings, including 17-year-old Dalan Pua. Dalan was an experienced hiker and an avid explorer. His Facebook page was filled with pictures of his many adventures. He was visiting his grandmother on the island and decided to use the opportunity to explore the stairs. When Dalan told her his plans, she was having none of it. But Dalan was not deterred, not even when he heard about a recent landslide that had taken out even more of the stairs and left 5 hikers stranded. On February 26, 2016, Dalan made what would be his final Facebook post. Throughout his hike, Dalan had sent pictures to his family and friends. The last picture was received at 11 a.m. After that, dead silence. His family reported him missing, and there's been many searches over the years, but Dalan was never found. But there is no shortage of theories about what happened to him. Some say he slipped and fell, but there are others who think something more sinister happened. In one of the pictures Dalan sent before his disappearance, some people spotted what they're convinced was a man hiding. They believed he might have something to do with Dalan's disappearance, but this elusive figure has never been found. Darsh Patel bear attack last photo. On September 21, 2014, 22-year-old Rutgers University student Darsh Patel was hiking through Opshawa Preserve in West Milford, New Jersey, with 4 of his friends. They spotted a 300-pound black bear 100 feet away, and the 5 stopped to take pictures. Attracted by the noise, the bear started making its way to the group, but the students stayed right there taking pictures. They finally ran off when the bear was about 15 feet away, splitting up along the way, but the animal was hot on their heels. When they regrouped later, they were 1 person short. 22-year-old Rutgers University student Darsh Patel was missing. After a 2-hour search, the police finally found Darsh. He'd been mauled to death by the bear. His phone was also found nearby, and it had fang marks on it. In it were his last pictures he took before his horrific end. Chalafu family selling children photo. In August 1948, a bizarre ad appeared in newspapers. In the photo, Chicago native Lucille Chalafu was putting her 4 children, Lana, Ray, Milton, and Sue Ellen, up for sale. Her husband Ray was out of work. They were facing eviction and had another baby on the way. The heartbreaking story touched the hearts of many, and the family received financial support and job offers from all over the country. Yet, just 2 years later, every one of those children, including the one Lucille was pregnant with, were taken or sold. For more than 60 years, no one knew the fate of these children. It wasn't until 2018 that their horrific story got out. John and Ruth Zuderman bought Ray for $2, about $26.50 today, so Lucille could play bingo. Milton was taken along for free because he cried and clung to his sister, a generous family. But behind closed doors, the Zudermans tied them up in the barn, forcing them to work long hours on their farm.
She was boss. We and my brother and me would be in the fields, and she'll be under the shade tree drinking iced tea with binoculars watching us.
17, Ray was raped and got pregnant, and the Zudermans took the baby and put her up for adoption. Ray ran away soon after. Milton didn't fare better. He became violent over time and spent many years in a mental hospital. Sue Ellen was dying from lung disease and could barely talk. Lana had died from cancer back in 1998. She never saw any of her siblings. David, the baby Lucille was pregnant with, was the only one to have a normal childhood. He was removed from Lucille's home covered in bedbug bites and adopted by Harry and Luella McDaniel at 9 months old. He joined the military. The surviving siblings tracked down Lucille and found out that after she left them, she remarried and had 4 more children she had kept. She never displayed any regret for letting them go. Lipstick killer message photo. On December 10, 1945, Chicago police found the body of Frances Brown in her apartment. She had been shot and stabbed. On the wall, they saw a message that read, "For heaven's sake, catch me before I kill more. I cannot control myself." It was written in lipstick. And so the lipstick killer was born, but this was not his first murder. That would be 43-year-old Josephine Ross, who had been repeatedly stabbed in her apartment 6 months earlier. But before the police could catch him, he kidnapped 6-year-old Suzanne Degnan from her first-floor bedroom. This time, the lipstick killer left behind a ransom note asking for $20,000 in 5s and 10s. A month later, pieces of her dismembered body were found in the sewers. After questioning and clearing almost 400 suspects, including a nurse with similar writing to the one found in the extortion note, 17-year-old William Hirons was arrested as the lipstick killer and sentenced to life in prison. But many don't believe the police had the right guy, even one of the victim's daughters. Some of the evidence they had didn't match up. He didn't fit the descriptions by witnesses. His handwriting didn't match the ransom note, and a forensic examiner said the fingerprint looked planted. A retired Chicago reporter even said another reporter had written the infamous message on the wall to make the case more interesting. At that time, Chicago police were known for torturing and coercing suspects to close a case. One of the earlier suspects, a janitor called Hector Verberg, said he had been starved and beaten. By the time he was released, the 65-year-old would spend 10 days in the hospital. He sued for $15,000, but got $20,000. William was also beaten and starved. The police didn't let the 17-year-old speak to his parents or a lawyer for 6 days. He was also given a spinal tap without anesthetic and the truth serum to loosen his tongue without consent. William died in prison after serving 65 years. Was he the victim of a miscarriage of justice or one of the most horrendous murderers in history? As far as the police are concerned, justice was served to the lipstick killer. Level 5. Space Shuttle Challenger. When the space race began between Russia and the USA, citizens of both countries were invested. In 1961, Soviet citizen Yuri Gagarin became the first person to enter space. Then, in 1969, American Neil Armstrong became the first man on the moon. But 20 years later, Americans weren't excited about space anymore. That all changed in 1986. The Space Shuttle Challenger would be going on its 10th trip to launch 2 satellites. But what made this launch really special was one woman in the crew of 7, Krista McAuliffe, a school teacher and mother of 2 who had been chosen as part of NASA's Teacher in Space program. She would have been the first teacher in space. She would also give lessons while in orbit. Suddenly, the dream that anyone could be lucky enough to get into space was spread across the country. On January 28, 1986, Americans tuned in to watch a space launch for the first time in a long time. Many schools even rolled out TVs so the school kids could watch. Cameras were rolling as the Challenger crew members said a brief word of thanks before boarding the Challenger. At 11:38 a.m., there were laughs and smiles as the shuttle lifted off. But just 73 seconds later, excitement turned to shock as the shuttle exploded. It was 3 months before the crew compartment was found. The astronauts' bodies were found crushed beyond recognition. A tragic end to a million dreams. The 2011 Reno Air Show incident. The Reno Air Show is a 3-day event that began in 1964 and has been held at the Reno-Stead Airport in Nevada since. Planes of all types and sizes gather to compete in races for a huge cash prize. Over the years, there have been several incidents, but only one death. Pilot Gary Levitz, after his custom plane broke apart during a race in 1999. That number went up in 2011. On September 16, 2011, the 47th annual Reno Air Races kicked off with spectators gathered in their thousands to enjoy the day's festivities, while pilots took to the air, some for demonstrations, others for the races. One of them was 74-year-old James Leeward. The professional pilot had competed at the Reno Air Races since the 1980s. In 2011, his modified fighter plane, Galloping Ghost, earned him a spot in the Unlimited Class Gold Heat and a step closer to the $1 million grand prize. That afternoon, James took off in the Galloping Ghost and the race was on, with James hitting speeds of more than 800 kilometers per hour. He made it into 3rd place when disaster struck. The plane suffered a mechanical failure, and James lost control and shot off from the race course. 10 seconds later, the plane nosedived. This was the last picture taken seconds before it crashed into the spectator stands. In an instant, 10 people were killed and 69 others injured. James Leeward also lost his life. When he took this picture, he had no idea he was flying for the very last time. Kim Wall and Peter Marsden's submarine murder. For months, Swedish journalist Kim Wall had been hoping for the chance to do a story on Peter Madsen, a Danish inventor who had self-made 3 submarines and was now hoping to make a rocket that would take him to space. On August 10, 2017, her wish came true after she received a text from Peter agreeing to the interview on board one of his submarines. She told her boyfriend the interview would take 2 hours and boarded the submarine around 7. Over the next hour, Kim's boyfriend got texts and what would be the last picture of her. When she didn't come back home that night, her boyfriend reported her missing. Rescue teams contacted Peter's submarine and he said he would head for the harbor. But 30 minutes later, the submarine sank. Peter was rescued, but there was no sign of Kim. Peter first said he had dropped her off on land. Then he said the submarine's hatch cover had slammed on her head. This story fell apart 2 weeks later when Kim's torso washed up on shore. The rest of her dismembered body was found weighed down under the sea. That's when Peter came up with another story. Kim had died from poisonous fumes and he cut her body to get it out of the narrow submarine. But Kim's death was no accident. Peter's laptop and phone showed videos he watched of women being tortured and executed. The minute the submarine's hatch closed, Kim was a dead woman walking. Peter already had a saw, knife, and sharpened screwdrivers on board. He tied her up, raped her, killed her, and dismembered her. Then he sank his submarine and got rid of the crime scene. Peter was sentenced to life, but in 2020 he escaped from prison. His stint in the outside world didn't last long, and that same day he was found and taken in. Blanche Monnier captivity photo. On the 23rd of May, 1901, the Attorney General of Paris received an anonymous letter that a starving unmarried woman was locked up in Madame Monnier's home. The Monniers were a well-respected conservative family of noble blood, not the sort that would do something like this. Nonetheless, police stormed into the house and were shocked to find an emaciated woman surrounded by old food, excrement, insects, and vermin. Her name was Blanche Monnier, Madame Monnier's daughter, who had disappeared in 1876. Before then, Blanche had the world at her fingertips. She was beautiful, from a wealthy family, and attracted wealthier suitors. But the only man Blanche was interested in was a poor lawyer. For Blanche's mother and her brother Marcel, this was the ultimate disgrace to the family. So Blanche was taken to a tiny room in the attic and chained to the bed. For the next 25 years, they mournfully told everyone that the lovely Blanche had disappeared, even long after her beau died. By the time Blanche was rescued, she was 56, weighed a mere 25 kilograms, and had gone mad. Blanche's mother was arrested, but died 15 days later. Her brother was convicted at first, but was acquitted because he was considered mentally incompetent, and there was no law against rescuing your sister from your mother yet. Blanche would live for 10 more years before dying in a psychiatric hospital. Anneliese Michael exorcism photo. In 1976, two Roman Catholic priests, Ernst Alt and Arnold Renz, were on trial, and it's not for the reason you think. The two were involved in the death of Anneliese Michael, who had starved to death during a 10-month-long exorcism. Anne grew up in a devout Catholic family in West Germany, but when she turned 16, Anne started having seizures, and by 20, she was on heavy psychiatric medication for psychosis and depression. Even with the drugs, Anne ate insects and drank her urine off the floor. Once, she bit off the head of a dead bird. But the final straw was when she told her family that she was hearing voices. They took her off the meds and approached the Roman Catholic Church for an exorcism. It was approved, and for the next 10 months, Ernst Alt and Arnold Renz exorcised Anne while she spoke in a deep, growling voice. These sessions lasted for 4 hours, and for the entire period, Anne was restrained and kept on her knees. When the kneeling caused some of her bones to break, they didn't stop or even treat her wounds. They just continued with the rituals. By this time, Anne had stopped eating and weighed just 33 kilograms. 67 exorcisms later, she died of dehydration and malnutrition. Anne was just 23 years old. Her parents and the two Roman Catholic priests were found guilty of negligent homicide. Though the priests were sentenced to 3 years of probation, Anne's parents never served time because they had suffered enough. Level 6. Dylan Redwine Case. On November 19, 2012, police received a missing persons report from Elaine Hall. Her son, Dylan Redwine, had flown into Colorado to see her soon-to-be ex-husband, Mark, on a court-ordered visit. The following morning, Mark left home to run some errands, and when he got back, the 13-year-old was gone. Father and son didn't have a great relationship, so people didn't think much of it when Mark said Dylan had run away. Then, months later, Dylan's body was found 8 miles from Mark's home. By then, a lot of people were suspicious of him.
What do you think's going on here?
I think Mark has something to do with it. I think he's either got him hidden out or, done something and disposed. I strongly think that he's involved.
He didn't join in the search for Dylan, and he had told an ex-wife the mountains were the best place to get rid of a body. He also told his older son, Corey, that Dylan's head needed to be found to determine the cause of death. Mark and Elaine had also appeared on Dr. Phil, where Mark flat out refused to take a polygraph test.
You should be doing backflips right now to take this polygraph test. You were the last person to have seen your son before he disappeared.
Well, and I don't believe that.
What do you believe?
I believe that the postal worker that saw Dylan later that afternoon, before I went looking for him.
The police did a more thorough search of Mark's home and truck and found traces of Dylan's DNA. He was arrested and would be sentenced to 48 years. So, why did Mark kill his son? Back in 2011, Corey and Dylan found some disturbing pictures of Mark on his laptop. He had on a wig, was wearing women's lingerie, wearing soiled diapers, and even eating human waste from said diaper. The boys' relationship with Mark had gone downhill from then. Dylan had planned to confront them during his visit and had asked Corey to send him the pictures. Faced with this humiliation, Mark had killed his own son, maybe in a fit of rage, maybe to keep him quiet. I guess we'll never know. Level 7. Lisa Holm Murder Case. There's a picture of what looks like an old, neglected public restroom. These yellowed tiles were the last things Lisa Holm saw before she took her last breath. Lisa Holm was a 17-year-old working a summer job at a coffee shop in Blomberg, Sweden. On the night of June 7, 2015, she texted her father that she had ended her shift and was heading home on her moped. But Lisa never made it back. Hours later, when her father came to check what was holding her up, he found her moped still there with the key in the ignition, but no Lisa. For 5 days, hundreds of volunteers flooded the area searching for Lisa. They slowly found bits of her things, her cell phone case and license, all pointers that Lisa might still be in the area. Eventually, they made their way to a neighboring farm. Then, a suspicious man showed up and told them the area had already been searched. But they didn't believe him and continued their search. Lisa's jacket and helmet were soon found in a nearby barn. They eventually worked their way to a nearby work shed. In one of the closets, they found Lisa's body with a rope around her neck. The teenager had been raped, hung by the neck in the barn before her body was hidden in the work shed. DNA evidence on Lisa's body and the ropes led them to 35-year-old Lithuanian Nerijus Belevičius, the same man who had tried to derail the search. Nerijus's computer contained a lot of pornography, and there was evidence that he watched the girls in the coffee shop from his room and jacked off to them. Nerijus was sentenced to life in prison, but he wasn't there long. He got beat up by a lot of other inmates and was even drenched in hot water one time. In 2022, he was fatally stabbed by another inmate. Robert Pickton, the pig farmer killer. When Canadian police executed a search warrant for illegal firearms at the Picton Pig Farm on February 6, 2002, they expected to find weapons, pigs, and maybe one or two weird things. After all, David and Robert Pickton were known for hosting wild parties on the farm. What they didn't expect to find were the personal belongings of a missing woman. They executed another search warrant on the property, but this time they found much worse. Skulls, hands and feet, bloody clothing belonging to a victim, a jawbone and teeth, and a garbage can with human remains. By the time they were done, they had found the DNA of missing women, some of them prostitutes, others were drug users. Robert Pickton had murdered 33 women between 1995 and 2001. Robert put the actual number at 49 and had told an undercover detective that he had hoped to make it an even 50 before he got caught.
Something that's fucking worth it. You know? I can make things disappear. I've done my work.
On the outside, he seemed like the quiet Pickton brother. He got rich selling parts on his farmland to property developers while working diligently as a full-time farmer on his family's pig farm. But behind closed doors, Robert lured women to his farm, handcuffed and killed them before getting rid of their bodies. How? I'm glad you asked. He told one person that he ground them up and fed them to his pigs. But there's also evidence that Robert may have ground up human flesh and mixed it with pork that he sold to the public. The serial killer got a taste of his own medicine in 2024 when he died from a fatal attack behind bars. Anatoly Moskvin. Anatoly Moskvin was known for many things: brilliant journalism, renowned historian, and linguistic expert. Some even called him a genius. But in 2011, the Russian man would come to be known by another name: the creepy man who collected dead girls. It started when the police received several reports about graves being robbed at cemeteries in and around the city of Nizhny Novgorod in Russia. After staking out cemeteries for 2 years, in 2011, they caught Anatoly digging up a grave. When they searched the apartment he shared with his parents, they quickly realized that this wasn't your run-of-the-mill grave robbery. There were life-sized dolls all over the apartment. A 45-year-old man having life-size dolls is pretty weird, but what makes Anatoly's case special is that they were the mummified remains of human girls, and he didn't stop there. Anatoly attached buttons or toy eyes into their empty eye sockets so that they could watch cartoons with him. Some of the bodies had music boxes in their chest, so that when he touched them, they would make sounds. He even kept doll-making manuals and maps of local cemeteries. All this was done right under his parents' noses. They just thought he liked making big dolls and thought nothing of it. 29 corpses were found in the apartment. The youngest was 3, the oldest 25. Anatoly was diagnosed with a form of paranoid schizophrenia and has been confined to a psychiatric clinic since, freeing the dead to rest in peace, finally. Andy's plane crash. On October 13, 1972, members of a rugby union team chartered the Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571 to take them to Chile for a match. But their plans were forever changed when the co-pilot, Lieutenant Colonel Dante La Guerrara, made a fatal mistake that would end with the plane crashing on a remote icy mountain in Argentina. Of the 45 passengers on board, 33 passengers remained alive, although many were critically or seriously injured. Aircraft took off in Chile, Argentina, and Uruguay to search for the missing flight. A few flew right over the crash site, but the blanket of white snow kept them hidden. As the weather worsened, the rescue teams called off the search, convinced that no one could have survived. So imagine the shock when 70 days after the plane disappeared, 2 of the survivors, Nando Parado and Roberto Canesa, trekked 50 miles to Chile with the news that there were still more survivors in the mountains. Over the next 2 days, the Chilean Air Force would find and rescue 16 survivors and reunite them with loved ones. The story of their survival shocked the world, but not as much as what they had to do to survive.
¿Cómo pudieron sobrevivir ustedes? ¿De qué se alimentaban?
Bueno, sobre ese tema.
At first, they made do with the food they had brought, but when they ran out, they resorted to the unimaginable, eating the flesh of the people who died. A picture they took shows what looked like a human spine. The media went crazy, and families who lost their loved ones in the crash were livid. Rumors swirled around that the survivors might have killed others and eaten them. That's where the slogan, "Rugby players eat their dead," came from. Eventually, the outrage died down. It certainly helped that Pope Paul VI sent a telegram to the survivors sanctioning their actions. The remains of the 29 who died were buried at the crash site. 15 were mere bones, while 13 bodies were found intact. Today, hundreds of visitors go there each year to remember those who lived and died there.